ladies and gentlemen. Today we dive into one of the most perplexing dynamics in relationships, a paradox that leaves many of us confused, frustrated, or even heartbroken. It's that maddening experience of someone who loves us pulling away, creating distance, or ignoring us. But what if there's a deeper story behind that silence? What if the ignoring is not rejection, but rather a reflection of vulnerability, fear, or an internal battle? Let's begin by understanding the profound connection between love and vulnerability. Love, at its very essence, is about being seen not just the polished, curated version of ourselves that we present to the world, but the raw, imperfect, and unfiltered parts of who we are. It's about opening the door to our deepest fears, insecurities, and hopes and saying, "Here I am. Will you still love me?" For many, this level of exposure feels terrifying. Vulnerability is not weakness, but for someone who has spent their life guarding their heart, perhaps out of fear of rejection, abandonment, or failure, vulnerability can feel like standing naked in a room full of critics. It demands a kind of emotional courage that not everyone is ready to offer. When someone loves deeply, they instinctively know the stakes are high. They realize that love has the power to bring them the greatest joy they've ever known, but also the deepest pain they've ever felt. And this is where fear creeps in. What if I'm not good enough? What if I give my heart and it gets broken? What if they see the real me and walk away? These questions can be deafening in the mind of someone who loves, yet struggles to embrace vulnerability. And so instead of leaning into love, they pull back, they ignore, they retreat. Why? Because avoiding vulnerability can feel safer than facing the possibility of rejection. It's not that they don't care about you. In fact, it's often the opposite. The deeper the love, the greater the fear. It's a paradox. They pull away precisely because they care so much, and the thought of losing you feels unbearable. We also need to consider how vulnerability triggers old wounds. If someone has experienced betrayal, heartbreak, or abandonment in the past, those experiences leave scars. Even if they love you deeply, those scars can whisper lies into their heart, saying, "Don't get too close, don't let them in. Protect yourself before they hurt you." But here's the hard truth: love without vulnerability is not love at all. It is merely a facade, a shallow imitation of the real thing. To truly love is to take off the armor, to let someone into the most sacred and fragile parts of your soul, and to trust that they will hold you gently. Now, what does this mean for you, the one being ignored? First, understand that their fear of vulnerability is not a reflection of your worth. It's not about you not being lovable or deserving. It's about their own internal struggle. They may not know how to navigate the vulnerability that love requires. They may need time, patience, and even their own personal growth to step into that space of courage. But second, you must also ask yourself what kind of love you deserve. While it's important to have compassion for their fear, it's equally important to hold space for your own needs. You deserve a love that is brave, a love that doesn't hide, retreat, or shrink in the face of vulnerability. You deserve someone who is willing to do the hard, messy, beautiful work of showing up fully, not just for you, but for themselves. In the end, love and vulnerability are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. True love demands that we risk the pain, the rejection, and the uncertainty because the reward is worth it. And for those who love but fear vulnerability, the question is not whether they care, but whether they are willing to overcome their fear. Because while fear might whisper, "Protect yourself," love will always say, "Be brave." So if he loves you and ignores you, recognize it as what it is, an act born out of fear, not a lack of affection. But also know this: real love calls for courage, and without it, vulnerability cannot flourish. And where there is no vulnerability, there is no true connection. When someone loves you but seems to retreat into silence, it's natural to feel hurt, confused, or even rejected. But what if that silence is not a sign of indifference, but instead a reflection of emotional overload? Love, while beautiful, can bring with it a flood of emotions, some of which people don't always know how to handle. Emotional overload happens when feelings become so intense or overwhelming that a person's first instinct is to shut down. It's not that they don't want to communicate or connect, it's that they simply don't know how. Love stirs up vulnerability, hope, fear, and longing all at once. For someone who isn't equipped to process such a whirlwind of emotions, silence becomes a refuge. It's their way of creating space to think, to breathe, and to regain some sense of control over what feels like internal chaos. Consider the sheer depth of emotions that love can evoke. It has the power to unearth insecurities and fears that may have been buried for years. A person may find themselves grappling with questions they've never had to face before. Am I good enough for them? What if I fail to meet their expectations? What if I give my all and still lose them? These thoughts can lead to an emotional traffic jam where everything feels so overwhelming that the only response is to go silent. For many people, silence is not a conscious decision, but an automatic response to emotional overstimulation. They're not necessarily choosing to withdraw. Their brain is simply overwhelmed and needs a moment to sort through the tangled web of feelings. This is especially true for individuals who have never been taught how to communicate their emotions effectively. Silence becomes their default setting, a coping mechanism when they feel too much, too fast. It's also worth noting that emotional overload isn't always tied to the relationship itself. Sometimes life stresses, work, family, past traumas, or personal struggles compound the emotions stirred by love, creating a perfect storm of overwhelm. The intensity of their feelings for you, combined with the weight of external pressures, may make them feel as though they're carrying too much at once. In these moments, silence becomes their way of pausing, of pressing the reset button on a mind that feels overstimulated. Another layer to this is how different people process emotions. While some are verbal processors needing to talk things out to find clarity, others process internally. They retreat into their thoughts, sorting through their emotions privately before they feel ready to express themselves. Silence, in this case, isn't a rejection, it's part of their processing. However, for the person on the receiving end of that silence, it can feel isolating, confusing, and even painful. Past experiences also play a significant role in this dynamic. If someone has grown up in an environment where expressing emotions was discouraged or punished, silence may feel safer than speaking up. They may fear that voicing their feelings will lead to conflict, judgment, or misunderstanding. Even if they love you deeply, these patterns of emotional avoidance can be hard to break. Silence can also be an indication of emotional self-preservation. When someone feels they are on the verge of becoming emotionally overwhelmed, they may retreat to protect themselves from saying or doing something they fear they'll regret. It's not that they don't want to engage, it's that they are trying to avoid an emotional outburst that they believe could damage the relationship or expose their own vulnerabilities. In many cases, silence is the result of someone feeling torn between the desire to connect and the fear of being misunderstood. They may love you deeply, but the weight of their emotions and their uncertainty about how to express them leaves them immobilized. Silence in these moments is not about pushing you away, but about finding a way to manage the intensity of what they feel. When someone loves you yet chooses to ignore you, it's easy to interpret their behavior as indifference or disinterest. But more often than not, this pattern of ignoring can be rooted in an internal conflict, a battle that they are waging within themselves. Love, while deeply fulfilling, has a way of bringing unresolved inner struggles to the surface, and for many, this confrontation with their own emotions can be profoundly unsettling. Internal conflict often arises from the competing forces of love and fear. On one hand, they might feel an overwhelming sense of affection, connection, and care for you. On the other hand, they may wrestle with insecurities, doubts, or fears that cloud their ability to fully embrace those feelings. It's not that they don't want to be close to you, it's that they're caught in a tug of war between their desire for intimacy and the emotional barriers they've built over time. One common source of this conflict is a deep-seated fear of inadequacy. When someone loves you, they might begin to see themselves through your eyes, and sometimes that reflection can feel uncomfortable. They may start to question whether they're enough for you. Are they worthy of the love you're offering? Can they meet your expectations? These doubts can create a sense of inner turmoil, leading them to withdraw or ignore you as a way of avoiding these uncomfortable questions. Past experiences also play a significant role in fueling internal conflicts. If they've experienced heartbreak, betrayal, or rejection in the past, those wounds can resurface when they find themselves in a new, meaningful relationship. Loving you may bring them joy, but it may also awaken fears of history repeating itself. This internal battle between wanting to love fully and fearing potential pain can make them retreat into silence or avoidance. Cultural and societal conditioning can further complicate this dynamic, especially for individuals who have been taught to suppress their emotions. Men, for example, are often conditioned to believe that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness. For someone with this mindset, loving deeply can feel like a direct challenge to their sense of identity. The depth of their feelings for you might clash with the ingrained belief that they must remain stoic or emotionally detached. This internal conflict can manifest as ignoring not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to reconcile their love for you with the expectations they've internalized. Another layer of internal conflict can stem from their own emotional maturity or readiness for a relationship. Love requires more than just feelings, it requires effort, communication, and commitment. For someone who is unsure of their ability to meet those demands, love can feel like both a blessing and a burden. They may pull away not because they want to, but because they are grappling with doubts about whether they are truly ready to give you what you need and deserve. In some cases, ignoring is a subconscious attempt to regain control over their emotions. When someone loves deeply, it can feel overwhelming, even disorienting. The intensity of their feelings for you might make them feel vulnerable, exposed, or even out of control. Ignoring you becomes a way to create emotional distance, giving them time to process what they're feeling and to regain a sense of balance. For some, this internal conflict is tied to their fear of dependence. Loving someone often means relying on them emotionally, and for people who value their independence or have been hurt by emotional dependence in the past, this can feel threatening. They may ignore you as a way of maintaining a sense of autonomy, even if it conflicts with their desire to grow closer to you. It's also possible that their behavior reflects an ongoing struggle with self-awareness. Not everyone has the emotional tools or language to identify and articulate their feelings, especially when those feelings are as complex and profound as love. They may not fully understand why they're ignoring you. They only know that the intensity of their emotions is creating an internal discomfort they don't yet know how to navigate. This inner conflict can leave them feeling paralyzed, pulled in two directions by their love for you and their unresolved fears or doubts. While they may long to connect with you and show you how much they care, their own insecurities and internal struggles create a barrier that keeps them from acting on those feelings. Ignoring you in this context is less about you and more about the unresolved turmoil within them. The ways people express love and sometimes avoid it are often deeply rooted in learned patterns of behavior. These patterns are shaped over time by their upbringing, past relationships, and life experiences, creating a blueprint for how they approach connection, intimacy, and conflict. When someone loves you but seems to avoid you, it may have less to do with their feelings for you and more to do with the emotional scripts they've internalized over the course of their lives. For many, the foundation of their relational patterns begins in childhood. The ways they learn to give and receive love as children often set the tone for how they approach relationships as adults. For example, if someone grew up in an environment where love was conditional, offered only when they achieved something or behaved in a specific way, they might internalize the belief that love is something they have to earn. This belief can create a sense of insecurity, making it difficult for them to trust that your love is unconditional. As a result, they may avoid you or push you away, fearing that they might eventually lose your affection if they fail to meet an unspoken standard. Similarly, a lack of emotional availability from caregivers during childhood can teach someone to associate love with distance. If they were raised by parents or guardians who were emotionally distant, critical, or inconsistent, they might have learned to protect themselves by keeping others at arm's length. In their mind, avoidance becomes a defense mechanism, a way to shield themselves from potential rejection or disappointment. Even as adults, these learned patterns can persist, causing them to retreat when faced with the vulnerability that love demands. Past romantic relationships also leave a significant imprint on someone's approach to love and avoidance. Experiences of betrayal, abandonment, or heartbreak can create emotional scars that influence how they interact in future relationships. If someone has been hurt in the past, they might unconsciously adopt avoidance as a way to safeguard themselves from experiencing that pain again. Loving you might feel exhilarating, but it can also feel risky. The closer they get to you, the more they fear the potential of losing you, and avoidance becomes a way of minimizing that perceived risk. Cultural and societal influences can further reinforce these learned patterns. For example, many cultures place a strong emphasis on self-reliance and emotional stoicism, discouraging people, especially men, from openly expressing their feelings. Under these conditions, love can feel like a vulnerability, something that challenges their sense of control or independence. Avoidance in this context is not a rejection of love, but a way of conforming to the societal expectation that emotions should be contained and controlled. The role of attachment styles also cannot be overlooked when understanding these learned patterns. Someone with an avoidant attachment style, for instance, may have a deep desire for connection but struggle to fully embrace it. Their learned response to intimacy is to create emotional or physical distance even when they deeply care about the other person. This isn't because they lack love, but because they've internalized a pattern that tells them distance is safer than closeness. Trauma also plays a powerful role in shaping patterns of love and avoidance. For someone who has experienced emotional or physical trauma, relationships can feel like a battlefield. Even when they care deeply for you, their learned response to vulnerability might be to retreat, to hide, or to put up walls. They may struggle to believe that love can exist without pain, and avoidance becomes a way of preemptively protecting themselves from potential harm. It's important to recognize that these patterns are not always conscious choices. Many people are unaware of how their past experiences shape their current behavior. They might not even realize that their avoidance is a learned response. It's simply the way they've adapted to survive emotionally. This lack of awareness can make it challenging for them to break free from these patterns, even when they truly want to deepen their connection with you. The way people learn to navigate love and avoidance is often reinforced over time through repeated experiences. If avoiding intimacy or vulnerability has worked for them in the past, keeping them safe from pain or rejection, they are likely to continue relying on this pattern. But while these learned behaviors may protect them in the short term, they also create barriers to the kind of deep, meaningful connection they desire. Their avoidance may also reflect an internal conflict between what they've learned and what they want. They might long to love you fully, but find themselves falling back on old patterns of distance and withdrawal. The habits and defenses they've built over the years can feel like second nature, making it difficult for them to act differently even when their heart is telling them otherwise. True love, at its core, demands courage and unflinching willingness to confront fears, embrace vulnerability, and step into the unknown. It's not simply about feeling affection or care for someone, it's about choosing to stay present and open even when the stakes feel high and the risk of pain is real. When someone loves you deeply but seems to hesitate or pull away, it often signals a struggle to find the bravery required to fully lean into that love. Love challenges people to confront the most vulnerable parts of themselves, their insecurities, fears, and doubts. It asks them to let down their guard, to trust that they can show their true selves and still be accepted. For many, this level of exposure feels daunting. They fear rejection, judgment, or even the possibility that they won't live up to the expectations of the person they care about. True love requires the courage to believe that their flaws, imperfections, and scars are not obstacles to connection, but pathways to deeper intimacy. This kind of courage also demands a willingness to confront past pain and trauma. For those who have been hurt in previous relationships, loving again can feel like walking into a battlefield. The memories of betrayal, abandonment, or heartbreak linger in their minds, making it difficult to trust that this time will be different. To love fully, they must find the strength to let go of the protective walls they built around their hearts, a process that requires immense emotional bravery. Fear of the unknown is another barrier that love compels people to face. True love doesn't come with guarantees. There is no way to predict how a relationship will evolve or whether it will stand the test of time. For someone who values certainty and control, this unpredictability can be deeply unsettling. Courage, in this context, means embracing the uncertainty of love and trusting that the journey itself is worth the risk, regardless of the outcome. For some, the courage required in love lies in overcoming their fear of dependence. Loving someone deeply means allowing them to become an integral part of their life. This can be terrifying for individuals who value their independence or have been taught to equate reliance with weakness. True love challenges them to rethink this perspective, to understand that leaning on someone doesn't diminish their strength, but instead enriches their humanity. Love also requires the courage to grow and change. Deep relationships are rarely stagnant. They demand effort, adaptation, and compromise. For someone who fears change or struggles with self-growth, this can feel overwhelming. Loving someone means being willing to look inward, to examine the parts of themselves that might need healing or improvement, and to take steps toward becoming a better partner. This process of self-reflection and transformation requires emotional strength and a willingness to step outside their comfort zone. Perhaps most significantly, true love demands the courage to let go of control. Many people approach relationships with an unspoken desire to manage or shape the dynamic, to ensure that things unfold according to their expectations. But love is unpredictable, messy, and deeply human. It cannot be controlled or contained. Loving someone fully means surrendering to the reality that they are their own person with their own needs, desires, and choices. This act of surrender requires immense bravery, as it involves releasing the illusion of control and trusting the strength of the connection. The courage required for true love also extends to communication. Expressing feelings, voicing fears, and addressing conflicts all take vulnerability and strength. Many avoid these moments of honesty because they fear rejection or confrontation. But love cannot thrive in silence or avoidance. It flourishes when both people are willing to step into uncomfortable conversations, to share their truths, and to work through challenges together.